Well, Coach, you have a 5-2 record in the top half of the Conference USA standings, and you also have your own new podcast. Congratulations. The Butch Davis podcast is underway. And again, we've talked about it all season long. So many impressive victories in this past weekend. Again, over 2 touchdown underdogs, and you come out with a double-digit victory. What was this past weekend like for this football team?
Well, it was an amazing deal. One of the things, AJ, I think, we talked all week long about from the week before when we played Tulane how important preparation is, and we prepared extremely well. We played well. So we wanted to add a little bit to that. We said, okay, let's prepare extremely well, but let's get off to a fast start. When you're on the road and you're playing against a team that's highly ranked, 6-1, Marshall football team that literally was threatening to break into the top 25 in the country. You don't want to let the crowd get into it. You don't want to let them to get an early momentum. And obviously, the start of the game, the fumble recovery, and scoring and taking a 7-0 lead, I think that was absolutely huge for our football team. It kept the excitement on the sidelines really upbeat. The kids really stayed determined. And so, every single one of these games, AJ, you and I have talked about it before, every single one of them, there's a great learning experience. Again, this is going to be one of those chapters where our kids are going to learn how to play with a lead and how to try to finish a game.
I thought it was really interesting when we were talking about the Tulane game. You mentioned you really wanted to force Jonathan Banks to throw the football to show that he could become a passer, and he didn't. This week, one of the big storylines was the rush defense of Marshall. 109 yards per game, 15th in the entire country. You guys go for over 200 yards. Was running the football a big emphasis in the game plan this week?
Well, AJ, one of the things, and this won't change for the next 10 years, one of the big things that we want to try to accomplish, we want to be multidimensional on offense. We do not want to fall into a pattern of where it's all about the run, it's all about the pass, it's all about maybe misdirections. We want to make the other team really struggle to defense what we're trying to do on offense. And if we have to throw the ball for 350 yards, I think Alex Magoo could do that. But running the last 2 games, we've rushed for over 225, 240 yards in a game, and that gives you a chance. If you can run the ball and control the line of scrimmage, it gives you a chance to get explosive big plays off of play action, of which obviously one of the big plays in the game was the play action pass that hit T.O. for the touchdown. And so those are things that obviously they kind of work hand in hand, and we were very fortunate that we were able to accomplish this past week.
Brian Muhammad, a huge interception, a pick 6, got that team the touchdown in the third quarter. 2 picks in the game. He has 4 on the season. We've chronicled his story all season long, coming back from being dismissed from the team and how bad he wanted it. I want to get into your philosophy. What goes into your decision to let a kid back on the team that hasn't had the greatest start to a career at a school? What went into your decision to let him back, become a part of the team? As a head coach, what goes into that?
Yeah. You know what, AJ, it's a great question. And I think every single kid, it's a different scenario. I think you have to sit down with them, and you have to try to build a little bit of a relationship and find out, okay, why were you dismissed, or why did you leave football? Did you lose the passion for playing? Was it, and every kid's got a little bit of a different story. Sometimes it's academic. Sometimes kids, unfortunately, there's family issues at home, maybe a passing away of a father or mother, and they go through a little bit of being, saddened, or they've got to quit school. They got to take away. We've had kids that have had to leave the football team because they needed to work to help support the family members at home. And listening to Brad, he had a lot of different things. He loved football and his passion. And 4 or 5 months before we let him back on, he looked like a shadow. He was in the stadium almost every day that we were practicing. He was hanging around, and you knew, okay, he's got a commitment. So he and I kind of came to an agreement. I said, if you do what you're supposed to do academically in the spring semester, I'll give you a chance to come back out on the football team. And I said, from that time on, it's going to be your responsibility to how much you get a chance to play. Well, training camp was spectacular. This kid, you couldn't have asked for a guy, work harder, leader, show up on time, be the first guy there. And obviously, not only did he earn a scholarship, but he earned a starting position on this football team and has become an excellent leader for us.
Well, you said he was in the football offices almost every day saying, Coach, give me a chance. Just give me an opportunity. You ever had a situation like that before?
To be honest with you, no.
Really?
Most of the time when kids usually leave, maybe they transfer to another school. Mm-hmm. Maybe they think, I'll show up a little bit and maybe I do it. But he was just, you knew he was adamant that I want another opportunity. And I'm going to tell you what, he has not wasted a moment of it. I mean, he's getting the most out of every single day being a part of this football program.
All right, Coach, taking a step back a little bit. It's been 16, 17 years since you were recruiting in the South Florida area, right here in Miami. You did it pretty well last time. Has the scene changed any since you've been here last time, or did you pick up where you left off? What's the recruiting scene been like for you getting back involved in?
Well, one thing, I think obviously there's more high schools than there were. I mean, obviously in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County and over in Southwest Florida, there's a lot more high schools than there were originally. But I think, some of the powerhouses continue to be the powerhouses in high school football, but there are still a lot of talented players. Even you don't have to be on the state championship team to be an outstanding football player. We had kids like Danny Morgan, who played in Broward County, who wasn't on a 14-1 football team. And and you just go and you look at the kids, you look at their character, their academics, you look at how much they love to compete, and can they come in here and help you build a championship football team? And there's a lot of kids in South Florida that we're excited about recruiting.
As we start talking each week on this podcast about different topics and games, I'd love to go back throughout your career and maybe reminisce a little bit and go back there. Hey, Fayetteville High School, 1973. Pawhuska High School. Charles Page, Sand Springs, Oklahoma. Will Rogers, back in 78. I mean, I was reading the Sporting News article that was written before this season started. You talked about, hey, I was teaching biology class. I had 5 biology classes. You were driving the yellow school bus to junior high boys and girls basketball. You were the basketball coach, a biology teacher. You remember those times in the Midwest?
Absolutely. And you know what? At the time, and I'm still not sure that wasn't the best jobs that I ever had. I mean, obviously, and people have heard me say this, if you don't love kids, you have no business coaching. And I loved it. I fresh out of college, and if they'd had 10 sports, I'd have wanted to help coach them. It was football, it was weightlifting, it was boys and girls track, the girls golf coach, and obviously the junior high basketball coach, and they wouldn't hire you back in those days. They wouldn't hire you unless you'd get a commercial driver's license. You had to drive the school bus because you were driving the basketball team, the track teams, wherever you were going, and just loved it. It was a great start. And I think one of the things that you do some research on some of the greatest college coaches and greatest NFL coaches. Yeah. A lot of them got their start in high school because one of the things about coaching in high school, a lot of times you have to win. And you don't get to recruit and you don't get to draft. You have to coach the kids that live in that neighborhood or live in that town, and you have to find a way to maybe win conference championships or get into the state playoffs. And one of the teams that I coached at Sand Springs, we went 12-2 my last year there, and you get guys that 185-pound offensive guard, and he's got to block some 265-pound defensive lineman that's going to go to Oklahoma, and you got to still try to find a way to win with that guy. So I think it helps you become creative. It helps you to understand that how important that teaching is and how important it is about creating a culture for winning.
Hey, ever any tense moments as you began to learn to drive that yellow school bus? Was that easy to learn?
I had driven trucks as a kid growing up because of my dad a little bit, but it was interesting. I mean, you're driving to all these track meets and stuff like that, and you're pulling into roadside restaurants to feed the kids at a small deal. So it's a little bit scary initially.
We might have to have you as an adjunct biology professor here.
That I absolutely had a blast doing.
Well, it brings up an interesting point. Look, so many of these prominent head coaches in the NCAA right now, they didn't just start there. Nick Saban didn't start at the University of Alabama. He was putting his dues in as a GA, long hours. And of course, as we mentioned, you teaching biology, junior high boys and girls basketball. But you said you felt like you had the best job in America. It's so often that period of time as a young GA, it's such a grind. I mean, what lessons did you take? Was it ever a grind for you? Do you ever think this is a lot right now to handle?
Well, I mean, obviously you were loaded. I quit being a head football coach at Tulsa Will Rogers High School to accept a position to coach the tight ends, to be a part-time coach. Back then, they didn't have graduate assistants. You were a part-time coach, which meant you could full-time recruit, but you got paid the same as a student. For Jimmy Johnson at Oklahoma State. But part of my responsibilities was go drive to Oklahoma City or Tulsa, pick up the film at 4 o'clock in the morning that was flying in from Colorado or Missouri, whoever we were playing the next week in the game.
No emails.
No email. Oh, God, Lord, no. And then to bring it back 16-millimeter film and edit it and break the films down and put it into the computer. And then, you're coaching, you're recruiting. I mean, there was a lot of things. But when I look back on it, as tough and as big of a challenge as it was, a fabulous learning experience because, I mean, literally there weren't 35 people on the staff, and everybody had little bits and pieces of their part of the preparation. It was boiled down to 2 or 3 guys that were the graduate assistant or the part-time coaches, and you did everything. Yeah. And we even back in those days, AJ, the NCAA allowed you to be sent on the road to scout. So you got a chance to go, and you'd fly into the city of the team you were going to play the following week, and you'd be there on game day. You did all the timing. You got the rosters. You got the video. You tried to bring it back. So, I mean, some of those days I look back on it, and I'm grateful that as hard as they were, there was a lot of learning that took place during that time.
That's a lot of responsibility for a young coach, traveling, getting the film, doing all that breakup.
Yeah, but it was. I mean, but obviously, the full-time coaches at that particular time, they did a great job of helping you. Yeah. And they taught you and said, look, this is how they started, and this is the way their careers got started. And I was fortunate enough that I had my hands in a little bit of everything. And after 6 months, then Jimmy made me full-time, and I became the wide receiver coach, the tight ends coach, the recruiting coordinator, and some of the things, Jimmy making me the recruiting coordinator at Oklahoma State and at Miami, in my opinion, probably helped facilitate my career as much as anything, because I became the common denominator on the staff, that I went all over the country. I looked at all the other 8 or 9 assistant coaches, their players, so that when we had a staff meeting and we'd sit there and say, okay, there's an offensive lineman in St. Louis and there's an offensive lineman in Houston, Texas, which one are you going to take? Because so sometimes if I had seen both of them, I could say, well, this one in Houston or this one in St. Louis is a little bit bigger, a little faster, maybe better grades or whatever. But it gave me a chance to recruit. I bet between Oklahoma State and the University of Miami, it probably gave me a chance to recruit in 25 or 30 different states. And so then when you become a head coach, now you've got contacts and relationships in all those different areas in the high-profile programs throughout the country. And later on, when I became a head coach, we were able to reap some of those benefits.
And I'm sure there's plenty of stories and lessons learned under Jimmy, which I'm sure we'll talk about throughout the season. Wrapping up this theme, hey, what was your coaching style back then? You look back, how have you changed as a coach, and maybe what characteristics are still the same from when you were a high school football coach and in those early years as an assistant?
Well, I played for Frank Brules, and one of the things, he was a consummate guy about surrounding himself with great assistant coaches. So that's one of the things that I adopted from him. As a high school coach, I was a high energy guy. I liked, when I was an assistant coach, running around loud, getting guys going, being upbeat, being positive, and I think that I've tried to carry that throughout my entire coaching career, regardless of being a coordinator, or a head coach, or a position coach, that I think kids enjoy being someplace that it's fun to be there, that going to practice is fun, weightlifting, running, working in the summertime, all that stuff, those are necessary things that you have to do to win, but you have to make it to where they enjoy coming, and that they love being a part of it. When I was an assistant coach and in meeting rooms with guys like Jerome Brown and Cortez Kennedy, and when I was a defensive line coach at Miami, I loved having those kids over to the house and having barbecues and watching TV and taking them to the swimming pool and just hanging out with them and getting to where you could build a relationship that they could trust you, that you were going to be there and have their back no matter what was going on.
And you fast forward to 2017, and now this week, another opportunity to write another story, homecoming week. A chance to earn bowl eligibility this week. As much momentum as this program has had in years, how excited are you for this upcoming week and another great challenge against a winning team?
Yeah, AJ, obviously very much so. I have appreciated and I've loved watching the growth and the development of these kids in this football program, that they're starting to learn the lessons that resonate on Saturday, that you don't get anything on Saturday that you don't earn during the week. The Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, how you prepare, how you practice. Obviously, you see a lot of the things that we've had to deal with during the course of the season. We talked about it like, so what, now what was kind of one of the themes, because, our first home game was in Birmingham, Alabama, and, traveling and spending 8 days up there and getting prepared for 3 games in a 6-7 day period of time, and then canceling the Indiana game. So this team has been challenged with a lot of different things, and each one of those adversities and challenges, they've been able to kind of sort through and figure out that block out all the things that you have no control over and just take care of the things that you do control, and subsequently the results on Saturday will take care of themselves.
We're looking forward to this weekend. Should be a great atmosphere, a great game here at Ricardo Silva Stadium. Coach, appreciate the time. Your own podcast. Looking forward to this throughout the season here.
Sounds great, AJ. Looking forward to it as well.
Hey, Coach, stay warm today. It's 65 degrees out there. Put a sweater on. That's the Butch Davis podcast.